I had a couple of amendments. One was to change the name of the bill to the Ronald Reagan Impose Your Beliefs on a Woman's Womb Act. And I thought that since Ronald Reagan was a conservative, Frederick Douglass was a liberal, he wanted to change things. Ronald Reagan wanted to keep everything as it is, so he would have been opposed to Frederick Douglass in that time. And he's certainly more of an appropriate figure to name this bill after, since he wanted to keep government off the backs of the people. And so we want to get government out of a woman's womb, let the woman make the decision. And so I was going to pursue that. That's amendment number 6, which I hereby withdraw. And also amendment number 7, which was to strike the name and replace it with the name "The Tea Party Determines What Rights a Woman Has" Act, which would certainly be appropriate. But based on what has happened, I think that this amendment would also be moot, and so therefore I will withdraw it, and I will yield back the balance of my time.
Okay. Mr. Chairman,
let me make sure I'm clear. Mr. Johnson, with U.S. unanimous consent that those 2 amendments, number 6 and 7 on the roster, be withdrawn?
I do.
Okay, without objection, those 2 amendments are withdrawn.
Mr. Chairman, down this way.
The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Shabbat, is
Yes,
recognized.
attempt to speak out of order.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I'll be very brief. The gentleman has just more or less taken Ronald Reagan's name in vain and said that had Ronald Reagan been around back in slavery times, he'd have been for slavery. I don't think that's the case. Ronald Reagan was responsible for freeing millions and millions of people who were behind an iron curtain, living under conditions which may not have been identical or even necessarily all that similar to slaves in this country, but he was responsible for making the lives of an awful lot of people on this earth a whole lot better. He was also a labor leader, as you might have known, early in his career, and he was a Democrat early in his career. Later on became a Republican, and had early on apparently been pro-choice and changed his mind about that, just other people have, and became strongly pro-life. But I don't think there's any indication at all that had Ronald Reagan been around during the times of Frederick Douglass, that he would have been a supporter of slavery.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman.
In 1980, candidate Ronald Reagan announced his candidacy for the President of the United States in Philadelphia, Neshoba County,
my time. I know
Neshoba County,
what you're going to say.
Alabama,
Reclaim my time.
Mississippi.
Regularly, the gentleman from Ohio has
Just reclaiming my time. This old canard about Ronald Reagan having announced his campaign because it was a Klan area. I mean, that's a scurrilous hit on.
Why else would he?
Excuse me, I didn't yield at this time.
Would the gentleman yield?
I will in a second, but it's just a scurrilous thing to say about Ronald Reagan.
Would the gentleman
He doesn't
yield?
deserve it. He would have just been 101 years old just recently, and I just don't think it's appropriate for you to be essentially indicating that Ronald Reagan would have been against the United States, Frederick Douglass, and would have been a supporter of slavery. That's below the belt, especially a guy. I would in a minute, okay?
Would the gentleman not interrupt the gentleman from Ohio?
I'm going to yield in just a second, okay? And I was going to be relatively brief, but I didn't realize you were going to drag up the Klan and try to wrap that around Ronald Reagan's neck. That's below. That is below the dignity of something that ought to be talked about in a committee that's as important as the one that we're here today. Basically, the legislation we're talking about here, and it always does bring up emotions on both sides, because we're talking about this side protecting innocent unborn children. And I know folks on the other side tend to be pro-choice, and the folks on this side tend to be pro-life, and it does get emotional. But there's no reason to bring Ronald Reagan into this and try to tie him into the Klan. I mean, that's just absurd. And try to say he would have been for slavery, just not true.
Would the gentleman please
I'll yield.
Yeah, I said he probably would have opposed Frederick Douglass, and I believe that that's based on evidence First,
reclaiming my time.
The use of the Southern strategy.
Reclaiming my time.
Second,
The gentleman from Ohio has the time.
I mean, if you look at a previous Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, he was the one, obviously, that actually signed the Emancipation Proclamation and was much more, if you want to look at Ronald Reagan, I think he would have liked to modeled what he stood for around Abraham Lincoln and the ideas of Frederick Douglass than the Klan. I'd be happy to yield to either the gentleman from North Carolina or the gentleman from Georgia.